So, Minister Catching and the team, over to you.
Amen. Amen. Let's go for you, Minister Joe, where you get well 100% soon.
Thank you.
And so last time we were here, we spoke a little bit about adverse childhood experiences. So today we have an activity that we will do. Just a recap, adverse childhood experiences are stressful or traumatic events that occur during childhood, usually before age 18, that can have long-term negative effects on our mental, physical, and emotional health. They usually fall into 3 categories: abuse, neglect, household dysfunction. It could be physical, emotional, sexual. It could be mental illness, someone having a relative who was incarcerated, substance abuse, divorce, or witnessing a parent treated violently. So we're going to get straight into the activity, right? We need you to take out a pencil or a pen, a paper. Thus, we need you to answer these 10 questions, okay? So that you can see what your ACES score is. Now, I'm going to ask this. Is everyone able to read each question clearly?
Yes, I can.
Okay.
Sister Catherine,
Yes.
is there a way to just make it slightly bigger? Just one notch bigger.
One notch
Possible,
bigger.
of course.
I tried, I manipulated. Is there anyone else who needs it a little bit bigger?
No, I will try to make it work with what I got.
And the reason I ask is because I know that you have access to Mrs. Ribas, who can probably slide you the questions, hopefully.
Yes, that's fine. Thank you.
Are you going to read them out loud to us one by one and we answer?
Would you prefer that I do that, Bishop?
Yes, I would, please.
Okay. All right. Now, these are all yes, no questions, okay? And you don't answer aloud. You can just, for each question that you have a yes to, you're just going to put number 1, you're just gonna number 1 to 10 on your paper. And for each question that you have a yes to, you're just going to kind of like do like a tally. It will just be like a yes. And Jamila will go through how we can tally that out at the end. Okay, it's very, very simple. Okay, so first question. Now, while you were growing up, during your first 18 years of life, and I'm going to preface this by saying this. Now, we all have different cultural backgrounds and we may all interpret things differently, right? But think about this. We may have grown up thinking that being beaten with a shoe or a belt that left marks may not be physical abuse, but it left a mark, so it is. Maybe you were raised in an environment that was prone to violence and you may not think that was something that's significant, but it actually is. So just answer the question, yes or no, if that applies, please. Okay. So did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? Yes or no? Next question. Am I okay to move on to the next question? Wait at about 5 seconds. So next question. Did a parent or other adult in the household very often or very often, push, grab, slap, or throw something at you or hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? Yes or no? Next question. Did an adult or person at least 5 years older than you ever touch or fondle you or have you touch their body in a sexual way or attempt or actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Yes or no? Number 4, did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Yes or no? Number 5, did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed to, or if you needed it? Yes or no? Number 6, was your mother or stepmother or father, a stepfather, often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at her, him, or sometimes, often or very often, picked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit for at least a few minutes or threatened with a knife or gun? Yes or no? Number 7, were your parents ever separated or divorced? Yes or no? Number 8, did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, or who used street drugs or prescription drugs not as prescribed? Yes or no? Number 9, was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? Yes or no? Last question, number 10. Did a household member go to prison? Yes or no? Okay. Let's go on to the next slide. So you can taking a deep breath and just let that out. Because I don't know where everybody is. Okay. So why do ACEs matter? Higher ACEs score increase health risks, right? Studies show that people with high ACE scores have greater risk of mental illness, substance abuse, chronic disease, and even early death. It can alter our brain development, how our brains function. It can lead to learning difficulties, emotional regulation, and relationship issues. It can also affect our long-term life outcomes. It's also linked to poverty, unemployment, homelessness, and just overall poor academic performance. So if we are looking at the matrix, right? How you tally your score is this. So for each answer that you have a yes to, it's gonna be like a score of 1, right? So if you answer yes to 5 questions, then you have a score of about 5, okay? So anything that's more than 4 is considered high. As you can see here, anything that's 0 to 3 is a low risk. A score of 1 to 3 is intermediate risk. Anything that's 4 plus is high risk, okay? So for low risk people, you're low risk. Intermediate risk, you might have some associated risks, but not too bad. 4 plus, we might need to look at what can we do to counterbalance, right, the high ACEs. So that's where we actually have some good news here, because we have all these increased risks that come into play with the increased ACE scores. We have behavioral issues, like we're missing work. We could lead to like lack of physical activity, gaining weight, using drugs and alcohol, depression, maybe stroke, heart disease, diabetes, and things like that. We don't want that, right? Because we are here to live well and to have our whole being healthy. And yes, ACEs can be overcome. This is where protective childhood experiences come into play, with supportive relationships, therapy, and community support. And I'm going to turn this over to Mrs. Ribas.
Good evening, church. So one of the reasons why I love to combine ACEs and PACEs together is because when we do the ACE score, it can feel overwhelming. And when we learn that the health risk and the behavior risk that are associated with those high scores, it can feel defeating. And so one of the things that I've learned in school and that I carry with me that is important is to always talk about the antidote. How do we overcome these challenges and these adverse childhood experiences that some of us may have had? And so this is where we get to talk about the good part, which is the protective childhood experiences. And they are positive relationships, environments, and experiences that help build resilience, emotional well-being, and long-term health outcomes. So basically, this is the medicine, this is the antidote to the ACEs. And so it's a similar quiz. I'll read out the questions to everyone, and it's a similar scoring system. For every question that you answer yes, that counts as 1 point, and then you tally your points at the end. So I'm just going to go through these questions, and then we'll move on once everyone has their tally. And this is when you were growing up prior to your 18th birthday. The first question is, did you have someone who loved you unconditionally? You did not doubt that they cared about you. And this does not have to be a parent only. This is, did you have anyone in your life that you knew loved you unconditionally? The second question is, did you have at least one best friend, someone you could trust and have fun with? The next question is, did you have anything regularly to help, or sorry, did you do anything regularly to help others, such as volunteer at a hospital, a nursing home? Did you volunteer at church or do special projects in your community to help others, such as food drives, Habitat for Humanity? Next question is, were you regularly involved in organized sports groups, i.e. soccer, basketball, track, or other physical activities, competitive cheer, gymnastics, dance, marching band, anything of that nature? Next, were you an active member of at least one civic group or non-sports social group such as scouts, church, or youth group? We know the answer to that when we're here today. Next is, did you have an engaging hobby, an artistic or intellectual pastime, either alone or in a group, such as chess club, debate team, musical instrument or vocal group, theater, spelling bee, or did you read a lot? Next, was there an adult, not your parent, that you trusted and that you could count on when you needed help or advice? A coach, a teacher, a minister, a neighbor, or a relative? Next, was your home typically clean and safe and with enough food to eat? Then number 9 is, overall, did your schools provide the resources and academic experiences you needed to learn? And then finally, in your home, were the rules clear and fairly administered? Okay, and we can move on to the next slide. So, childhood protective experiences. There are 7 main categories that we look at, and some of these things you would have noticed in the questions. The ability to talk with the family member about your feelings. Did you feel or felt experience that family is supportive in difficult times? Was your family there for you when you had challenges? Did you get to enjoy participating in community traditions? And that's the churches, the sports, all those different activities. Number 4, did you feel that you belonged in your school setting? Did you have friends? Did you feel like you were a part of, as opposed to being an outcast? Number 5, did you feel supported by your friends, whether in the school setting, outside the school setting? Did you have a nice supportive group or a couple of friends? Number 6, did you have at least 2 non-parent adults who genuinely cared for you? And then number 7, did you feel safe and protected by at least one adult within the home? Research has demonstrated that both positive and adverse experiences shape brain development and health across the lifespan. Studies on child development show that positive childhood experiences, or what we call PACEs, lay a foundation for optimal childhood development and flourishing adult mental and social connectedness despite co-occurring adversities. So basically, by having some of these protective factors, even when you do have some of these high risk factors from the adverse childhood experiences, These are the things that are building resilience and helping us thrive in spite of the challenges we may have had early on in life. You can go to the next slide. PACEs are important because they buffer against childhood adversity. They promote emotional well-being and resilience. They improve long-term mental and physical health outcomes. And a lot of times I think we overlook how our mental affects our physical. On a couple slides back, for me, when I was doing this research, when I first started learning about ACEs and PACEs, it shocked me that things such as diabetes, heart attack, and stroke could be tied to my adverse childhood experiences, or if I had, not so great upbringing. You don't think about those things being tied to your mental health and those experiences that you had as a kid. So by having these protective factors and these positive experiences, these are the things that are going to help mitigate some of those challenges that you may face as well. And then they also give you a guide to interventions to support children and families, especially for our kids that are still growing, that are still in the process of growing up. If we know that they're having a hard time or they may have had some trauma happen to them, these PACEs give us a place to start with how to support them and surround them to help stave off some of those possibilities that could arise from the ACEs. You can go to the next. So, do PACEs cancel ACEs? The short answer is no. PACEs act as a shield against adversity, but they don't erase your ACEs. So if you had some challenging things happen while you were growing up, it doesn't erase it. It doesn't change that, but it does help. It's not a one-to-one balance either. So if I have one childhood adverse experience and one protective, it doesn't cancel each other out that way either. But having higher PACEs create a protective factors that make it less likely that from your ACEs to result in severe long-term consequences. So again, going back to those behaviors such as risk-taking behaviors, illicit drug use, alcoholism, depression, anxiety, by having these PACEs, it doesn't cancel out those things, but it most definitely reduces the risk for us. The more PACEs a person has, the better they can recover from their ACEs. And the earlier the interventions, such as therapy, mentorship, community programs, it increases the likelihood of positive outcomes. We can go next. And why do we need to know this information? This information is important because it will help us heal from our past trauma. It will help us develop emotional resilience, improve our mental and our physical health. Because remember, these things are not only tied to our mental health, they're tied to our physical health. It's going to help us break these generational cycles of adversity by learning this information. Sometimes, like Catherine said, with our various diverse cultural backgrounds, some of us don't consider spanking abuse, some of us do. By having this information, we can know, okay, we want to do better with our kids and with the next generation to help stave off some of these adversities. And then finally, it gives us a blueprint on how to create a positive life outcomes for our kids and for ourselves. You can go to the next slide. And then, church, I just wanted to remind us that we are part of the solution. If you go back to some of those PACEs, a lot of us, our friendships were in church, our mentors were in church. This is where we had adults that weren't our parents that cared for us, that we knew we can turn to. This is where, when we were in trouble, we could turn to for help. And so I just want to remind us that we, the church, we really are part of the PACEs. We are part of the protective factors. We are part of the solution for ourselves as a community and for the next generation of children. And that's it. Any questions?
Any questions on this first part?
Yeah. Oh, this voice here. I was, when we're answering the questions, I was like many of you, thinking of where I grew from. And you said when your ACES score is like 4+, you are at higher risk for mental problems, like the one we're talking about tonight. So when I was thinking about my home country, I see that some children, they do have like 4+, but then they still come out to be better without developing mental issues versus in this country. So my question, I guess, is that dependent on the society you grew up in, or is it that even though you have a 4+ ACEs, or your PCEs are even higher to counterbalance the ACEs? I don't know whether you understood me from
Yeah.
my point.
I
Yeah.
understand. I think like Jamila was saying, you have those protective factors, but then you also have like resilience, right?
Yeah.
It just kind of depends on the environment. It depends on those resilient factors. And it's just varies from like child to child, and all those different environmental factors that may have come into play, and that internal, maybe what they're motivated to do. We have no idea how all those different factors come into being. And another new research well, it's not new, but another area of study that I've been interested in that I can't even start to delve into right now is how epigenetics plays into that, plus resilience, like in neuroscience, like how our neuroscience plays into it, epigenetics plays into it, resilience can play into it. All these factors can like combine and help that child and that person overcome tremendous amount of adversity and succeed no matter how much life had thrown at them.
Thank you.
I have a comment to make. I think this is very excellent tonight. Joe, I think to answer your question, kind of piggyback on what Minister Catherine was saying, is that, and she said it at the beginning, some of us may not think that we had any ACEs because when, we grew up in a culture where they beat you with iron cords and rattans, they pick switches, and it was nothing for us because we were not told in our upbringing that that was abuse. We were never, you know what I mean? We didn't hear that growing up. So that was just a part of the culture. You got beat with rattan, you got beat with switch, you have marks. So what? We move on, we make it, you know what I mean? You were never, I mean, Catherine can talk about that. The cultural aspect of it, that was just, and we never heard abuse, the word abuse. I didn't even know I had any ACEs. I was one that scored, I think, 0 on the ACEs until Jamila a few years ago brought up the fact to me that, Mom, you went through war. You went through a civil war. I never even considered that an adverse childhood experience. She said, Mom, you went through war, and that's why you are the way you are with all your alarms, and you got 10 cameras around your house. You're acting out. It's because of that experience you went through as a child. But I just went through my war. We came out of it and never even thought about it. Catherine, maybe you can talk to that.
Exactly. That heightened sense of protection, I mean, it just heightens your ability to like self-protect, and defend. It's very unconscious, I don't want to get all Sigmund Freud here, but that's another aspect of it. We tend to pick up on these things that happen to us in our childhood that kind of become our defense mechanisms. and that we just kind of like develop our own little coping skills, right? So from these things that we experience, so we learn how to protect ourselves. And it becomes part of us in these little ways. Like Jamila had said to Bishop, it's just a way to just protect ourselves so that as we go through life, we just kind of like, it just like shows up in these little, you just see it showing up in our lives in these ways. And we try to like figure it out. And then you can kind of like trace it back to like, oh, okay. Now I see, now I understand. Our hurricane ACES, Lord have mercy. Yes. Yes. Any other insight onto ACES? I mean, I know like there could be so much more. I mean, violence, exposure to violence, it's not just war. I mean, there's a lot of exposure to violence in so many different ways, from observing like intimate partner violence, domestic abuse, and the two are different, by the way, because intimate partner violence is different than domestic abuse. Domestic abuse can be anybody living in your home, having that violence between each other. And then intimate partner violence is actually, between like intimate romantic couples, in the home or in a relationship. So that you have that kind of exposure, and then you have like community violence with the rise in like the drug wars, turf wars and things like that, that people have been exposed to a lot over the last few decades. In our schools, we hear it, we see it. So I'm sure that's also in some ACEs. That could be in some ACEs. Let's see. Are there any? If there aren't any other questions, there's a short segment on anxiety and depression that we can go into.
Can I just add something
Sure.
to the question that Joe asked?
Mhm.
And I need to do a little more research so I can give you some evidence-based information. But I do believe that oftentimes the major difference between how these mental health challenges show up here in the US and how they may show up in someone's home country is safety nets. I think that here we have so many safety nets in place that if you're not well, you don't automatically end up on the street. But in so many different countries, these safety nets don't exist. And so even if you are sad, if you're depressed, if you're anxious, if you're fearful, it is literally get up and go work, make your money, or be on the street. And so you don't have time to acknowledge or address some of these issues that you may be facing. And so because you are always in survival mode, you're always in go mode, like I got to get up, I got to go to work, I have to do this. There's nothing there to fall back on. Oftentimes it can appear as though we don't have these challenges when they may be there, but you just don't have time to deal with them, acknowledge them, or even see that they're there because you are trying to survive in life. I think here we have, like I said, some safety nets in place. And so there are some people, it's not, anyway, there are some people who may be able to stay home and say, today I'm dealing with depression, anxiety. They may have accommodations at their job. A lot of people, some people have complained that this generation in particular, they have a lot of accommodations for mental health. And so they can call in and say, hey, I'm having a mental health day, I'm not coming in. And I do not believe that is the case for a lot of places around the world. And so you just have to function no matter what. And because you are forced to function no matter what, it could appear as though everything is okay. Anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there.
good point.
Mr. Catherine, can I say something quick on that?
Yes,
She's
sir.
so right about what happening in this country.